Gospels show that Jesus is completely different than the New Testament presents him, that Jesus actually did right things. There's a Joshua mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and these people think that that's Jesus, and this Joshua wrote things. They identify him as the teacher of righteousness, all these other wonderful things. And this is sort of some of the areas that more of the anti-theists are going into than these theories, which were very, very common back in the last century. In the rationalist German viewpoint that came out at that time, people had to come up with a rationalistic explanation of all miracles. For example, when Jesus walked in the water, you know what that really was. There was a sandbar there. And the disciples were confused, and they thought he was actually walking in the water when actually he was walking on the sandbar. See? And maybe when Peter got out of the boat, he was also on a sandbar, but then he stepped off the sandbar and started to sink, and Jesus reached down and picked him up, and they got in the boat. And this is how people are trying to explain away all the miracles that occur in the Bible.
It's quite convenient. A storm's just blown over, and all this is going on, and Jesus just happens to know where that sandbar is. It takes him all the way from shore right out to where they are.
Sure. Well, but there has to be a rationalistic explanation. If you deny the miraculous, if you deny the supernatural, there must be a rationalistic explanation. One scholar responds to the resurrections that Jesus performed of Lazarus and the widow of Nain's son as rescues from an early grave. These people weren't dead. Jesus just resuscitated them and all things like this. So anyways, that's where a lot of these theories came from. They're a little bit out of vogue these days because people are now getting to the point where they're simply denying that Jesus ever existed. And go from that way, then you don't have to deal with the resurrection, you don't have to deal with the New Testament, just throw the whole thing out the window and start from scratch. So that's how they're dealing with that. Another aspect of the resurrection that we're going to address this afternoon is the fact that there are some groups that deny the resurrection by saying that Jesus Christ rose only spiritually from the grave. One of the major groups that does this is the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, or Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus Christ died on a stake. They believe that Jesus did not have a spirit, that no men have spirits actually, but that Jesus was a man who died on a stake. He was buried, and as one early Watchtower Society publication put it, the man Jesus is dead, forever dead. That he was not resurrected physically from the grave, but that he was recreated as a spirit being. Now, in Watchtower theology, they are teaching that Jesus was created as Michael the Archangel, that he then became a man. Michael the Archangel was a spirit, then he became a man, Jesus Christ, and then when we come to the quote-unquote resurrection, then we have Jesus being recreated as Michael the Archangel. This is the Jehovah's Witnesses' position relative to the resurrection. What does the Bible say about the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Was it spiritual or was it physical? We're going to address that subject right after we talk to Dell in Glendale. Dell, can you hear me? Dell, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Jim.
Hi.
I'm glad you're back on.
We're glad to be here.
I missed you. I want to ask you something. I guess tell you something and ask you. As I was studying about the resurrection, or the last, about 15 years or so, it began to dawn on me how real it was. Uh-huh. And what helped me to realize that was to realize how Christ had to lead the apostles who were right there with him all the time, step by step through his telling them he was going to die, and his actual death, and then his burial, and then his resurrection, and then revealing himself to them, and crowning it with Thomas, doubting Thomas. Did you get that impression? It was like step by step, even though he told them they didn't understand until he showed them what happened?
Oh, yes, indeed. In fact, the disciples, as the Bible presents it, were very confused, very flustered. All through the gospel narratives, the writers tell us that the disciples did not understand that the Messiah must suffer and die. Common Jewish expectation at that time was that the Messiah who would come would be a human conqueror, a military leader. In fact, excuse me? And in fact, as I was listening this week to a program where a Jewish person was on discussing his views of Jesus, that was one of the reasons he rejects Jesus, is that Jesus died. Yes, in fact, a friend of mine was on that program. I had arranged for him to be on that program, Chuck Hoppus. But anyways, this is what they were expecting. They were expecting a military leader, not a suffering servant. And so, by far, Jesus had to, as Luke puts it, by many convincing proofs, prove to the disciples that he was indeed alive from the dead and that he had indeed been resurrected.
Just the mere fact that when it dawned on me that they had to go through that step by step, realizing that's what helped me to realize the reality of his resurrection.
Indeed.
I just wondered if you had noticed that too.
Oh yes, I noticed it, and it's very clearly presented in the. I noticed it, and it's very clearly presented in the New Testament that Jesus had to prove his resurrection even to his disciples. They did not understand it until after the resurrection itself.
Well, you just verified the same thing to me. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Briefly before we take our break, I was mentioning that the Jehovah's Witnesses deny the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. They believe that he was resurrected as a spirit being, Michael the archangel, and go around proclaiming this in their books, in their literature. At this time of year, they would probably bring this up if you were talking to Jehovah's Witnesses. But what does the Bible say about the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ? Well, for example, in John chapter 2, verses 19 through 21, Jesus, when talking about the temple, said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." When talking to the Jews, when they asked for a sign. And they didn't understand what he was talking about. But John goes on to say he spoke of the temple of his body. And the fact is very clear that Jesus said that in 3 days he would raise up his body, the body being the body that he was crucified in. But relevant to what Jehovah's Witnesses were saying right beforehand, we want to define what a resurrection is. The Greek term anastasis, which is resurrection, means a standing again. And to qualify as a true resurrection, that which died must come back to life again. Now, in the Jehovah's Witness position, they do not have a resurrection. There is no resurrection, really, in Jehovah's Witness theology, because that which died was a human being, Jesus. That which was raised was a spirit being, Michael the Archangel. That is not a resurrection. And hence, the society, if it were to be honest with itself, would have to say that they believe in the recreation of Jesus Christ as a new being, Michael the Archangel. But that is not what the Bible presents. The Bible presents